Welcome to this explainer. Seriously, I am so thrilled you're here today because we are embarking on a journey into literally one of the most foundational texts in human history, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Now, if you've ever found yourself wondering how to actually navigate the crazy complexities of life, well, you're in exactly the right place. See, Aristotle's approach, it isn't just dusty, ancient philosophy. It's actually a highly practical, goal-directed guide designed to help us understand human nature and ultimately figure out how to live a truly flourishing, excellent life.
So I want you to really think about this for a second. What does it actually mean for you to live a good life? Like, what's your ultimate goal? The absolute beauty of Aristotle's work is that he tackled this exact same question. But he didn't do it by looking up at the clouds or just dreaming up abstract ideals. No, instead, he looked right at the gritty realities of daily life and human behavior to find an answer.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to break this philosophy down into 6 clear steps today. First, the goal of human life. Second, understanding virtue and potential. Third, the doctrine of the mean. Fourth, the power of habit. Fifth, Aristotle's concept of justice. And finally, number 6, practical wisdom in daily life.
Starting us off with section 1, the goal of human life. To really get Aristotle's ethics, we first have to understand his incredibly positive view of human nature. He firmly believed that a human being isn't just a political and social animal, but fundamentally an ethical and rational one. We're wired for connection, and we're definitely wired for purpose.
To really grasp what this means, it helps to contrast Aristotle with his famous teacher, Plato. See, Plato believed in innate knowledge. He thought morality was based on this ideal world totally independent of our actual lived experience. But Aristotle, he completely rejected that. He viewed ethics as a practical science. He leaned into a kind of moral relativism, arguing that ethical knowledge doesn't come from some abstract ideal, but from empirical study, psychology, and real personal experience. And because experience obviously differs from person to person, Aristotle argued that moral truth isn't the exact same for all people in all places. It's actually grounded in our daily realities.
And what exactly is that daily reality striving toward? Well, Aristotle gives us an absolutely crucial term for this, eudaimonia. It basically translates to happiness or a good, flourishing life. He believed this is the ultimate goal that every single person desires. Now, Aristotle saw the entire universe as this goal-directed hierarchy where absolutely everything has a specific purpose. It is really important to note, just from the text itself, that he controversially applied this hierarchical worldview to defend slavery, arguing that beings he considered lower inherently serve the highest rational forms of life. But his overarching point, however uncomfortable its historical application was that the universe has a deliberate design, and we are an active part of that goal-directed scheme. Which brings us right to section 2. Understanding virtue and potential. So if eudaimonia is the final destination, how do we actually get there? Aristotle says we have to be virtuous. But virtue here doesn't just mean being a nice person. It literally translates to a type of excellence. And you achieve this excellence by fulfilling your inherent potential, based on your natural function.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how every single object or role has a distinctive capacity that defines its entire purpose. Think about it like a giant puzzle. The virtue, or the excellence, of a racehorse is how fast it is. A knife's virtue is its sharpness. A soldier's is bravery. An administrator's is following the rules. And a farmer's is producing crops. Excellence simply means performing your specific, designated function remarkably well.
So I'm going to pose this question directly to you. What is the potentiality of human beings? If a knife's capacity is to cut, what is our distinctive capacity? What actually separates us from the objects and roles we just talked about?
The answer? It's the capacity to reason. According to Aristotle, this is our absolutely highest potential. Our ultimate goal is to really develop our reasoning powers, which means that wisdom is the highest human virtue. When we develop our reason and we act with wisdom, we align with our true nature. And that doesn't just reward you as an individual, it actually contributes to the well-functioning of the whole universe.
But look, it's not all just sitting around in a room thinking deeply. To truly flourish, we have to actively develop specific capacities in our lives, things like friendship, civic participation, aesthetic enjoyment, and intellectual inquiry. Aristotle actually divided our virtues into 2 separate categories: intellectual virtues, which we exercise through the process of thinking, and moral virtues, which are exercised entirely through our day-to-day actions. And that leads us right into section 3, the doctrine of the mean. This is Aristotle's famous methodology for how we actually go about applying those moral virtues in our everyday choices. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what he meant. Aristotle argues that every moral virtue is a mean. It's perfectly balanced between 2 extremes. You've got a deficiency on one side and an excess on the other.
Take courage, for example. It's not about being utterly, blindly fearless. No, it's the precise balance between the deficiency of cowardice and the excess of being totally foolhardy. Our modesty, that's the balance between shamelessness and shyness. Virtue is always, always found in hitting that perfect, balanced middle ground.
But, and this is a huge but, here is the crucial nuance. Aristotle explicitly warns us that this principle is not a precise formulation, right? There's no mathematical equation for courage. The exact mean between cowardice and rashness differs from person to person, and it changes from situation to situation. Remember, ethics is a practical science. There are no exact unbreakable laws here. We have to approach these things case by case.
Moving on to Section 4, the power of habit. Naturally, this raises a really obvious follow-up question. If finding this balance is so tricky and so case by case, how on earth do we actually develop these carefully balanced virtues?
Well, the answer is habit and practice. You can't just read a book to become virtuous. Virtue isn't learned primarily through reasoning or someone instructing you. It's a vehicle driven entirely by habitual behavior. To Aristotle, a generous person isn't someone who just decides to be generous, one time. A generous person is routinely generous. Consistent, daily practice is absolutely the key to hitting that balanced mean day in and day out.
Now we're going to zoom out a bit for Section 5, Aristotle's concept of justice. We've talked a lot about individual habits, but how does virtue dictate our interactions with society as a whole?
Aristotle defines justice incredibly clearly. Justice means giving people exactly what they deserve. They shouldn't get less than what they deserve, and they shouldn't get more. The whole central pillar of this concept is fairness. It's about treating alike cases alike.
And he structured this beautifully. He actually divided justice into universal justice, which covers basic obedience to the law and individual moral virtue, and particular justice. Then particular justice branches out further into distributive justice and corrective justice, which itself takes on forms like deterrence, retributions, and restorative measures.
Let's just quickly unpack these key elements. Political justice dictates that mutual relations are controlled by law, and Aristotle actually noted that political power firmly belongs among the virtuous. Individual justice is basically just the moral disposition to do just things. Distributive justice, that's all about the fair distribution of benefits and burdens in a society. And finally, corrective justice is the system we use to safeguard rights and liberties, whether that's through punishing a crime proportionately or restoring a person to their previous state.
Let's move to Section 6 and see how this all builds into practical wisdom in daily life. This is where we bring Aristotle's grand philosophy all the way down to the specific decisions you are making every single day. Remember earlier when we talked about Aristotle rejecting Plato's ideal world? Well, by throwing out that ideal world, Aristotle replaced it with a heavy focus on wisdom that is grounded in reality. And he split this into two distinct categories: theoretical wisdom and practical wisdom.
Practical wisdom is an intellectual virtue, and honestly, it's perhaps the most important takeaway for us today. Having practical wisdom means being able to accurately assess what is actually required in any given situation. It takes knowledge, emotional sensitivity, a lot of rich personal experience, and really strong reasoning. It's the ultimate tool, because it literally tells you when you should follow a rule and exactly when you should break it, all in order to achieve that virtuous mean.
Which brings us to the end of our journey and leaves us with one final question to chew on. How are you going to apply the doctrine of the mean to a decision in your life today? Seriously, look at the extremes you face, tap into your practical wisdom, and practice the habit of balance, because according to Aristotle, that is exactly how you craft a truly flourishing life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep pursuing your highest potential.